Shalom, Wabaraka, Mispaka, peace and blessings, family. First and foremost, I just want to give all praises to the Most High for installing this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding into His people and waking us up from this deep slumber. And only a few of us truly are starting to understand that we've been really lied to the point where they changed the maps around and that our true homeland is in the Americas. And this is coming out piece by piece, and this video is going to be one of the major icing on the cake, because I will go into detail furthermore to introduce more knowledge proving without a shadow of a doubt that Israel, the land of Canaan, is in the Americas. Just in case some people are still not convinced, I've got more info and I got more proof. But this is not even the end, because I got Migration Series Part 5 coming up, which is going to be the Exodus. And I got Migration Series 6 coming up after that. And I got Migration Series 7. We're going to have a lot of information proving the Americas at one point was home to civilizations, which included Israel, Egypt, Assyria, Chaldea, etc. In this episode of the Migration Series, I will thoroughly explain the migrations of Isaac, Esau, Jacob, and all of Jacob's children. Stay tuned. And the Most High came again unto Abraham and told him to take Isaac, his most beloved son, to one of the mountains of Moriah and offer him there. Moriah was probably another term for Moreh, which was west of the Salt Sea. This was Abraham's final test, sacrificing your most beloved son. Abraham was of course reluctant at first, but his extreme dedication to the Creator made it impossible to disobey. Not only that, but given the historical and geographical context behind the scenes of the situation, child sacrifice was not at all unusual for Abraham's setting. During his time, Abraham lived in Canaan. The true and ancient Canaanites were very indulged in human sacrifice, especially child sacrifice. All throughout the Torah, we see the history of Canaanite ritual sacrifice. However, there is very little archaeological evidence proving child sacrifice happened in Israel ritually during ancient times. In fact, most of the sacrifice skeletons in Israel or Lebanon have been identified as Greek or Roman. The most widespread cases of child sacrifice happened in the Americas, beginning in the Uto-Aztecan region in Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and New Mexico, then spread south to Mexico and even Peru. Just before Abraham penetrated Isaac with his knife, an angel stopped him and told him that it is known that you truly fear the Creator. But Abraham didn't travel all this way to Moriah for nothing. Fortunately, he saw a ram caught in the bushes by its horns, took it out, and sacrificed it instead. Just like in the Middle East, Western North America has wild, curved-horned rams as well, which can especially be found upon mountains. Years later, Sarah died at 127 years old in the land of Hebron, aka Arba, the city of giants. Now Hebron, according to Genesis 37:14, was in a valley near Sichem. As I already pointed out, Sichem means ridge or backbone in Hebrew and borders the plain of Moreh, according to Genesis 12:6. And Hebron bordered a cave in Machpaleh, according to Genesis 23:19. Now we must mentally create a map using the puzzle pieces given in Torah to find the true location of these biblical places. We have A valley, B, a ridge, C, a plain, and D, a cave. These were all relatively close together. No area on earth fits this description better than western Utah. The valley could be in modern Tule County south of Lucian, Utah, which is an area between two mountains. The ridge of Sichem would be only a few hours east of it. modernly known as the Desert Peak, which is shaped like a human spine, and Sichem does mean backbone in Hebrew. The plain of Moreh would then be the area between Sichem and Hebron. In Utah, that area would be the salty land. Deuteronomy 29 and 23 does state that if we transgress against the Most High, our land will be just like Sodom and Gomorrah, hot, dry, and salty. The plain of Moreh in Utah has become completely salty, covered by salt flats from the Salt Sea, which perhaps overflowed and dried up after we left our land. Now Machpaleh borders Hebron. In this case, it is directly south of the valley of Hebron, which has a cave known as Danger Cave in Utah. This is the cave of Machpaleh, where Sarah was buried. There was ancient civilization in and around this cave. Artifacts of textiles, nets, moccasins, weapons, tools, etc. have been found in this area. These people were probably of Hittite origin, whom of which Abraham purchased Machpaleh. Then Abraham became very old and told a servant to find Isaac a wife. But his wife could not be a Canaanite of the land. Abraham wanted his son to have a Hebrew wife, but all of the Hebrews were far beyond the Euphrates in Mesopotamia. This meant that his servants would have to make a long journey to Shinar, which would have taken him a month on foot and 2 weeks on camelback. Luckily, he rode upon a camel to meet his destination, putting his camels in bonded wooden rafts to cross the river. Not only one camel, but a train of 10 camels, with lots of food and water on each of their backs, indicating that he would be gone for an extreme amount of time. The people of Genesis were a nomadic people who were accustomed to traveling long distances. Not one person in Genesis lived in the same region all of their life. The servant eventually made it to the city of Nahor, met Rebekah, who was a very beautiful virgin. Therefore he pleaded with her family to take her to the land of Canaan to marry Isaac, the son of Abraham, and they let her go with him. And her family said unto her before she left, "Let God make you the mother of millions, and let your descendants own the land of them that hate them." Now, before Abraham's servant arrived to Canaan with Rebekah, Isaac dwelt in Lahairoi, which was called the South Country, because it was at the southern part of Canaan. Lahairoi means well of the living one seeing me. This indicates that there was a large natural spring in the area that was perhaps very beautiful. As a matter of fact, southeastern Nevada is home to several pristine natural springs, and it's a perfect location to be the biblical Lahairoi. According to Genesis 16 and 24, Lahairoi is near Kedesh. Kedesh is in southwest Utah without a shadow of a doubt. I proved this already in Migration Series Part 3. And it makes a lot of sense for Lahairoi to be in southeast Nevada, which borders southwest Utah, because that's where Kedesh is. They are supposed to border each other. In the Middle East, specifically the Sinai Peninsula where Kedesh would be, there are no natural springs, just dust and sand dunes. There is no area in the Middle East that biblical archaeologists identify as Lahairoi. When Isaac met Rebekah, he took her into his mother's tent, lied with her, and she became his wife. Then Abraham died at 175 years old. Then he rested with his wife in the cave of Machpaleh. Isaac and Ishmael mourned over the death of their father. Eventually Rebekah conceived, and Isaac bore Esau and Jacob. There was a famine in Canaan, so Isaac and Rebekah went to Gerar, where there was springing water. In my last video, I explained how Gerar could not possibly even exist in the Middle East, but it makes 100% more sense in North America. Gerar is a woody lodging region in a valley somewhere between Sinai and Kedesh, which was 11 days apart. Then they left Gerar and went north to Beersheba, which is a southern city of Judah, according to 2 Samuel 24:7. Notice it says they went up, which means a higher elevation. Gerar was somewhere in either Southern California or Nevada, which both have low elevations in contrast to southern Utah. So they would go up from Gerar to Beersheba. Beersheba means well of the sevenfold promise. Unlike the wells of Lahairoi, this well was man-made and not a natural spring. Beersheba was a city of the furthest south of Judah, on the border of Edom. We know that Judah lies north of Edom, and Edom borders the plain of Zin, aka Kedesh, according to Joshua 15:1 and Numbers 34:3. I have already proven how the land of Zin is the flat area of southwestern Utah. Therefore, the ancient city of Beersheba would just be north of the flat area in southwestern Utah. This particular area has millions of gallons of groundwater that stems from the Colorado River Basin. Therefore, this area is a perfect place to dig for a well. These wells were usually no more than 20 feet deep. If the wells got too deep, the inside would cave in before the digger got out, often will result in death. Unlike traditional wells found in modern times, biblical wells were dug without a pump or pulley system. They were just made with a deep hole and unhewn stones on the inside as a casing. But now all the water in these wells would be dry, and the entirety of the wells would be covered by southern Utah's many dust storms. It would be very unlikely to find these wells without excavation. The only pre-Columbian American wells we see today are in that of the Anasazis kivas, which also had to be excavated. Many historians will argue that Aboriginal peoples of the Americas did not even dig wells. But according to the books such as Connecticut Historical Collections, written in 1838, History of New London, written in 1860, and Archaeological Society of Connecticut Bulletin, written in 1973, Aboriginal Americans have constructed and utilized numerous wells with no European help or intervention. Now, after Jacob disguised himself as Esau to beguile his father into getting a blessing, Esau wanted to kill Jacob. Therefore, he had to flee to Haran because of the advisory of his mother. Just like Abraham, Rebekah did not want her second son to take a Canaanite wife like her first one did. According to Genesis 28:10, Jacob left Beersheba to go to Haran. With the knowledge of Haran being somewhere in the Appalachian region, Jacob wouldn't have ventured directly east at first, but north, then made his way around the Salt Sea. Then he would have began to go east. If he would have went east right away from Beersheba, which we have concluded to be in southern Utah, he would have to pass through the impenetrable red desert of southeastern Utah and Colorado, then somehow manage to pass over the upper region of the Grand Canyon, which was virtually impossible. According to Genesis 28:11, Jacob went out to a certain area and rested and dreamt of a staircase to the heavens. alluding that this area was a spiritual connection with the heavenly realm. There the Most High spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac, and the land you are on now I will give it to your seed. All the land you see north, east, south, and west will be your territory. So Jacob named the place Bethel. This makes a lot of sense because Bethel, like I have already proved, is in northern Utah, and north was the initial direction he was traveling in. Then from there, he would turn east and go to Haran. When Jacob made it to the land of the people of the east, he saw a well and 3 flocks of sheep, which, just like rams and goats, could also be found all throughout the Americas, especially in mountainous regions. Therefore Jacob saw people and asked them where they are from. They said, we are from Haran, which literally translates to, we are from the mountains. These mountains were the Appalachians. There Jacob met Rachel, who he was exceedingly grateful to know that she was from his kindred. He then spoke to Laban, her father, about marrying her. He served Laban for a total of 14 years for her. At first, instead of getting Rachel, however, he got Leah. Then 7 years later he got Rachel. But he loved Rachel more. So the Most High opened Leah's womb, and she birthed Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah. Then Rachel's maid Bilhah bore Dan and Naphtali. Then Zilpah the maid of Leah bore Gad and Asher. Then Leah bore Issachar and Zebulun, and Rachel finally bore Joseph. The first 11 of Jacob's sons were born in Haran. Now we read in Genesis 30 and 14 that Reuben went out into the field and found mandrakes. In Hebrew, mandrakes are called dudeh, which translates to love apples, because they look like female ovaries. They are a sweet ground fruit known as May apples. May apples, also known as American mandrakes, are indigenous to eastern North America, around the Appalachian Mountains. This is the same exact location of where Haran would be on an American model. This is no coincidence whatsoever. This is another perfectly fitting puzzle piece. Also in Genesis 30, we see 3 other North American plants mentioned: the poplar tree, the hazelnut tree, and the chestnut tree. Poplars, also known as Leodendron tulipiferia scientifically, is also indigenous to eastern North America, around the Appalachians, in the exact same location as Haran on an American model. Same thing with the hazelnut trees. These are indigenous to North America, Europe, and the Middle East. But among the American hazelnuts, they grow solely in eastern America, around the Appalachian Mountains, in the same exact location of Haran on an American model. Now it gets very interesting with the chestnut tree, which don't even grow in the Middle East. In fact, to this day, they can only be found in Europe, China, Japan, and of course, eastern North America, around the Appalachian Mountains, the same exact location as Haran on an American model. More perfectly and strategically fitting puzzle pieces. Now in Genesis 31, the Most High commands Jacob to leave Haran and return to Canaan. He left on camelback. When he crossed the river, he looked toward Mount Gilead. Now in Hebrew, Gilead translates to rocky region. So the scripture is literally saying he looked toward the rocky mountain. This can only make sense in the American model. It would be 1000% ridiculous in the Middle Eastern model. Allow me to explain. For instance, we read in Genesis 31 and 22 through 23 that Laban found out Jacob fled from Haran 3 days after the fact, then pursued him 7 more days, then finally found him on the mountains of Gilead. This means the mountains of Gilead was a total of 10 days away from Haran, and this was on camelback. So let's do some math real quick. Camels generally walk at around 10 miles per hour, which is extremely fast compared to humans. There are 12 hours in an average day minus nighttime, and 10 days total. Multiply all three of those variables together and you will get 1,200 miles, which is approximately the same distance from the Appalachian Mountains to the Rocky Mountains. However, in the Middle East, from modern Haran to modern Gilead is not even 10 days away on foot. In fact, it would take about 7 days on foot and about 3 days on camelback. These locations are simply too close. Not only does the Middle Eastern Gilead mathematically contradict scripture, it also does not physically fit Hebraic description. Gilead was a land of rocky mountains. However, modern Middle Eastern Gilead is full of dull, soft, and grassy hills. This is another epic fail. All throughout scripture, we see that Gilead borders the plain of Jordan. This as well fits perfectly with the American model. The area Jacob, his 4 wives, and his 11 sons went was the Mount of Gilead, which would be the mountain west of modern-day Denver, Colorado, and an American model. After Jacob and his family left Mount Gilead, some angels met him, and Jacob sent the angels to Esau into the land of Seir as messengers. Esau would then return to Jacob with 400 other men with him. Now let us find the actual location of Seir. Seir means hairy in Hebrew. Esau became the father of the Horites, who were a hairy tribe of cave-dwelling people. Don't think of them as Neanderthals or primitive, however, because the scripture describes them as a royal people who had dukes and nobles prior to any ruling class of the children of Israel. However, there are 3 main geographical pinpoints we can use to determine the actual location of Seir. Number 1, Horeb, also known as Sinai. Number 2, the Red Sea. And number 3, the land of Israel. The land of Edom bordered all 3 locations. We have already determined Sinai to be the Mojave Desert because of its cacti and its arid landscape, as well as its proximity to the Red Sea, which we have already concluded to be the California Gulf because of its reeds and red tide. Not to mention, it was called the Red Sea before the Middle Eastern one was called the Red Sea, and still to this day is called the Red Sea, aka the Vermilion Sea. And we know that Sinai is the Mojave Desert as well because of its proximity to southwestern Utah, which we have concluded to be the plain of Kedesh, aka Zin. The plain of Kedesh, according to scripture, is the southern border of Israel directly north of Edom. This means that Edom is the land between Sinai and Israel eastward along the Red Sea. The land of Edom was also close to Egypt, according to scripture. One major factor of Egypt is the River of Egypt. The River of Egypt is the Colorado River on an American model. It flows into the Red Sea, which Hebraically would make it a part of the sea. To truly understand the Red Sea, we must understand the concept of a sea in an ancient Hebrew perspective. The modern definition of a sea is a large body of salt water covering most of Earth's surface. However, in Hebrew, sea is yam, which means roaring, and is literally in reference to any body of water that is constantly moving, flowing, and making noise. The Colorado River, Hebraically, would be considered a river and a sea, or yam, because some parts of the river are large enough to have actual waves that resemble that of the ocean. The entire river used to be like that before it began to dry up. So the Red Sea is not only the Gulf of California, but the Colorado River as well. With this information, we can conclude that the true land of Edom is most of the red land in south and eastern Utah. And ironically, when you translate the phrase land of Edom into Hebrew, it would be Eretz Edom, which literally transliterates to red earth. When we read scriptures in Obadiah, we see that Esau dwelt in the clefts of the rock. Clefts is another term for caves. In that same area of south and eastern Utah, we had the cliff-dwelling civilizations. Many of these cliff-dwelling people dwelt in caves like the Horites, and many of them lived like kings in full-fledged mountain castles. These people are today called the Anasazis. The word Anasazis is a Hebrew phrase that can be broken down Hebraically. Let's break down the prefix and the suffix first, then the root. The prefix is an, which Hebraically is aleph nun. Aleph always means a strong leader. Nun could mean a number of things, but among those things, none can represent an heir to the throne. So we see a connotation of royalty with the prefix an. Now Z is the suffix, which can either be represented by zayin, meaning a sword, or a za, meaning to hunt. This denotes that Anasazis were hunters and warriors, but the interesting part is the root of the word asa. Right off the jump, we can connect with Esau because there was no E in ancient Hebrew. No one knows what happened to the Anasazi people. Historians say a cataclysmic event caused them to migrate south, but there is little evidence of this. Scripture did say that the original land of Edom will be empty and desolate, and that both Esau, Moab, and Ammon will be on the east. My theory is these Anasazi Edomites migrated through Mizraim before building ships to cross the Atlantic. They would later join their Moabite cousins who also migrated from the Americas and be called Moors. They would then spread through North Africa and Europe until they found a place like home with red earth. And instead of calling themselves Sazis, they called themselves Sadis. You also have tribes like the Catawbas, who are Edomites that migrated as far as the Carolinas. The phrase kata means sin in Hebrew, and just like Edom, these people relied off of hunting and war. They were also known as Esau Indians and looked just like Negroes. Jacob was extremely afraid of Esau, but Yah told him to go back to Canaan anyway. On his way to do that, he and all the people with him crossed the Jabbok River. The Jabbok River, according to scripture, is the border of the Ammonites. Ammon is east of the Salt Sea, so the Jabbok River could be one of two rivers in Utah, either the so-called Weber River or the so-called Jordan River, which was falsely identified by the Mormons. We know that the modern Jordan River of Utah cannot be the real Jordan River of Utah because the real Jordan River of Utah is supposed to flow north of the Salt Sea according to scripture. So the real Jordan River of Utah would be the Bear River. But after Jacob crossed the Jabbok River, we read that he wrestled with an angel all night and prevailed. Thus his name was changed to Israel, which means a prince of power. Israel named the place Pioneer, for he has seen God face to face. And he limped from that place with a dislocated hip and saw Esau coming. Although Israel and his family were very afraid, Esau greeted him with forgiveness and exuberance. Israel then departed from Sichem, a city that once was near Sichem. There Shechem, the son of Hamor of the Hivites, took Dinah, the daughter of Leah, and went into her by force. Therefore Simeon and Levi went into the city and gruesomely slew all the males, including sucking infants. Israel and his family then left that place and went north to Bethel, the same place Israel was when he fled from Esau. There Rachel gave birth to Benjamin, and sadly died shortly after labor. Scripture then says, Jacob journeyed from beyond the Tower of Edar. The Tower of Edar is in Bethlehem. Now, of course, Bethlehem was destroyed along with all the other cities of Judah, but we still see remnants of stone walls and cities throughout southern Utah. In fact, when you Google search Tower of Edar, you will see a picture of a tower from Utah falsely called the Tower of Edar and falsely identified as being from the modern state of Israel. This tower on the internet that is falsely called the Tower of Edar is actually Navajo Tower ruins in Utah. Now, why the need to lie? Now, Israel's favorite son Joseph was exceedingly hated and abused by his older brothers because he was loved by his father. Israel loved Joseph so much that he gave him a coat of many colors. Wearing colorful garments later became an average standard for Joseph's descendants in the kingdom times and to this day, as the fruitful children of Joseph remain scattered on both sides of the Atlantic. However, Joseph's brother hated him so much that they jumped him and threw him into a pit. As time passed, Ishmaelites coming from Gilead saw Joseph in the pit, took him and sold him into Egyptian slavery. As Israel once deceived his father Isaac, so did his children deceive him, having him naively believe that Joseph was eaten by an animal. Joseph became a slave in Egypt, but a prosperous one, and the Most High was on his side. Therefore, he became an overseer in the Egyptian's house. However, after he was falsely accused of raping his master's wife, he was thrown into prison.
I don't want to play with you.
Well, if you don't, I'll just tell my papa you tried to rape me.
However, this unfortunate event was very fortunate because it gave way to a new chain of events. While in prison, he interpreted people's dreams and Pharaoh's dreams as well. He predicted 7 years of fruitfulness in Egypt and 7 years of famine. Pharaoh then gave him authority over Egypt. Therefore, his name was changed to Zephnath-Paneah. This is another piece of the puzzle because archaeologists found a shrine in the Kincaid's Cave of the Grand Canyon dedicated to a ruling man with the exact same name, Zephnath-Paneah. Joseph was definitely the most intellectual sons of Israel. He knew not only how to interpret dreams, but he also knew how to grow plants and make them successfully yield an increased amount of produce. At the end of the 7 years, Joseph had enough corn on stock to feed all the nations of the land. During the 7 years of famine, he became the richest man in all the land. And through his methods, he saved the old world from famine. Now, this is one major thing that people tend to overlook. Such agricultural advancements were not present anywhere on earth besides the Americas. Bottom line is, American Indians happen to be superior when it comes to agriculture. This could very well be because of Joseph's intelligence. One of the methods Joseph probably used to yield heavy produce was the Three Sisters method. The way this method worked is by planting beans and squash in the same area as corn. The three plants then work together perfectly. Corn provides tall stalks for the beans to climb. The beans provide nitrogen for the corn to grow, and the large squash leaves, which grow close to the ground, provides shade to the soil and locks in moisture. Corn alone is a plant that can prove without a shadow of a doubt that the land of the Old Testament is in America. Prior to the 1500s, corn grew nowhere else on earth except for America. Corn especially didn't grow in modern day Egypt because there was absolutely no corn on the entire African continent before it was brought over by Moors and conquistadors. The origin of corn or maize can be traced back to Mexico and southern North America. This is the same exact location of where Egypt would be in the American model. However, there is a major hijack that comes along with corn in the scriptures. People say that corn is a mistranslation in the Tanakh and should say wheat or cereal grain. However, in Leviticus 2 and 14, the corn for a meat offering had to be dried by fire. We know that wheat and grain is already dry and would burn in fire. However, people dry corn with fire all the time. We read about dry or parched corn in several locations in the Torah. However, it makes little sense to dry or parch grains which are literally already dry. Although corn and cereal grains like wheat are closely related genetically, the corn of the scriptures had to be a more juicier form. And if the biblical corn is just a genetic term for wheat, why is there a clear distinction between corn and wheat in Amos 8 and 5? Around 20 years later, Israel's sons told their father that Joseph is not dead, but is a governor of all of Egypt. So for the first time in nearly 40 years, Israel left the land of Canaan and went down into Egypt. He went south into Beersheba, and the Most High came again unto him, saying, I am Yah, the God of thy father. Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I will there make thee a great nation. So Israel, his remaining wives, his sons, his daughters, and his grandsons and granddaughters went down into Egypt, 66 people total, and they all went down into Goshen. Goshen means drawing near in Hebrew. This location is most likely near a major river. It was one of the most fruitful areas in Mizraim at the time because of this river. In an American model, Goshen had to have been built on the southern streams of the Colorado River, which till this day still have Hebrew names, like the Yampa River or the Hasayampa River. In this land, the children of Israel will become a nation. They will spend the next 400 years in Egypt.